Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Max Davidson and I am the Director of Content Design at Outreach. I've been in my role coming on a year now, and I'm using all of you to give myself a chance to reflect on my journey building a content design function by scratch. So thanks in advance for being willing to listen to my ramblings. Here is a basic outline of what we're going to talk through today, which is 5 chapters in the adventure of starting up a new team, along with a handful of lessons learned along the way. I thought it might first be helpful to give you some context on who I even am and how I ended up here sweating through my first conference talk. So how did I even get here? I started in this field like most people, by accident. After a couple of years mismatched as an introverted and awkward sales rep at Google, I actually transitioned into a new job as a support writer, managing the help centers for the Google Docs suite. As I was writing Help Center articles, I realized that I wanted to actually have a hand in building the things that I was writing around. I took a 20% role, which at Google is the opportunity to flex into a new role, in UX writing for enterprise products. Fast forward a bit, and a hybrid role opened up at Airbnb, which I knew would provide me the opportunity to jump further into content design and take on more responsibility, because it was a smaller company and a smaller team. So in 5.5 years there, I was an IC on pretty much every team. So from the launch of Airbnb Plus to the establishment of our anti-discrimination product team, and I also managed for a few years on the host side of the business. The pandemic happened, and that allowed me some time to think about what was important to me, and I realized that failure or not, I would regret not trying my hand at building my own team at some point in my career. Serendipitously, I got an email from the head of UX at a company called Outreach, which is a leader in sales enablement software and conversational intelligence. And my prospective new boss said all the right things about ratios with product design and the importance of voice and tone. And I was hooked. So here we are, almost a year later. But before I even got to the point of taking this role, I had to come to the decision that this was something I was interested in. And if you're in the same boat as I was at the moment, the first question you may be asking yourself is, why would I do this to myself? For me, I had had amazing mentors at Airbnb who showed me what empathetic leadership could look like and how to execute on it. And while it can be a stressful and lonely position at times, it also allows you the pleasure of forming a team with the values you cherish. So for me, this was a people-first mentality. You can also try out new ideas and strategies without red tape or major consequences for mistakes. You can help shape an UX leadership team that embraces and celebrates the value of content design. And you can also finally start the content design team that stands up for itself and builds cool shit. But it is scary. As I was interviewing, there were so many signals telling me that this wasn't the right decision for me. I wasn't visible enough. I hadn't given a conference talk yet, and I was afraid to even open LinkedIn because it felt like I was so far behind everyone else. It felt like too big of a hill to climb from the support I had received as an IC or even a manager to being all on my own. I also felt like I was going to make mistakes without the guardrails I had in place, and someone else was going to have to come in and clean up my mess. This brings us to the first chapter of our story, making the leap in the first place. And my first lesson for today, from my first year in the role, is you can do it. You can do this. Consider me to be content design's own motivational speaker for a minute and remind you that you've got what it takes to lead a team. How do I know this? Well, from my experience, you'd be surprised about how the most basic things about content design are mind-blowing to people. Things like messaging frameworks and voice and tone. Our basics are often their blind spots. Also, while there are some amazing programs out there teaching content design, how did most of our leaders that we know get there? By diving in and operating through trial and error. And while we know that content design has been alive and kicking for quite some time now, it's still a bit of the Wild West when it comes to actually having a team. And you've got just the experience and compassion that the team needs. You could have an industry veteran design director come in and try their hand at it, they'd probably get it about 60% right. But they still wouldn't be able to walk in their team's shoes like you can, and that's the other 40% that really matters. So now you've made the decision and gotten the job. Congratulations. But now it is week 2 and you've gone through the training videos, you've got the computer set up, you've met all the smiling people. Now what? Your schedule may be completely blank. Your day may be completely yours. Why is that? Well, in many cases, the rest of the UX and product organization might not come knocking right away. They're very happy that you're there, but they're not sure what to do with you. And this provides you an opportunity at first. So where do you get started? It really depends on your situation. Do you have headcount or do you not? Assuming you do get to hire, we're on to chapter 2, which is selling your vision. As many of us have learned by now, it is a very hot market out there. Companies are finally coming to their senses around the value of content design, yet there are a limited number of folks out there who are senior enough or who have the experience that we are seeking. As a startup or a company with a nascent content design practice, you may have to pull all the levers to get folks in the door, such as coveted senior roles that they may not be getting at their larger organizations, or opportunities to shape the voice of the organization, or simply things like flexibility of location. But none of these value props will matter at all, though, if you bring them in for interviews and they feel like this. The way you can keep a candidate engaged and interested is by providing a pleasant and personal interview experience for those who are willing to dip their toes in. This gives the candidate a glimpse into the amazing culture that you're trying to build that is unique to you and to the company that you've invested in. For me, this is all about first impressions, and here are some ways to make a good one. You may consider writing an interview kit for you and your team that outlines the various stages of hiring, provides sample questions and a rubric with expectations for the folks who are on your interview loop. This helps other partners know what you're looking for and what the bar is for quality. It also helps avoid bias in the interview process. It's also nice to be able to keep the same general folks on the interview loop so that they can properly evaluate candidates and you don't have to re-explain content design over and over again. You can also find your early champions this way so that you get good signals off the bat from candidates. It is very important, especially at a smaller, less well-known company, to keep it short and sweet. Writing exercises, for instance, have been around for a long time, but they really only work at big, well-known companies, and they're also unpaid labor. You can actually establish their UX thinking in the in-person sessions when you bring them in for interviews, perhaps asking them to evaluate designs in one of the interviews so that you get a sense of their process. Another final important piece is, for the love of all that is holy, please follow up with candidates. You may have a recruiter who keeps in touch, but oftentimes they are slammed or covering multiple teams. And that extra personalization from you can make the difference for a candidate, both in the beginning and the end of the process. And even if they're not the right fit or they choose another team elsewhere, word travels, especially in an insular community like ours. So now you've hired someone awesome, or you've never had any headcount to begin with. This brings us to chapter 3, getting it all in writing. Especially when starting a new thing, I found that you need to make your expectations and your expertise official. The easiest way to defend yourself and your new team is to point back to the processes, to the standards, and to the communication channels you've written down to carve out a physical space for yourself made up of documents and spreadsheets. So what should you get on paper first? For me, the most important piece here was the how. How does content design work? How does the team fit into the wider UX and product processes? Content standards and a glossary of terms are another great place to start because it helps your team establish credibility quickly, and you can get early buy-in from leadership on the importance of consistency. And another final area where you can start establishing your impact is in providing guidance to the wider company on voice and tone. But it's easy for me to rattle off these huge projects and much more difficult to execute them in between the other day-to-day tasks you and your team face. So here are some lessons I've learned to help keep this work feeling manageable and impactful. So when it comes to documenting your processes, I like to do as the Romans do. It's essential that this information makes its way into wherever the wider team processes are outlined. So for my team, this meant making sure that I worked with my other directors to update our UX page that covered the various stages of the design process, so that when anyone went to look for how the UX team operates, our process couldn't be missed. And as you think about building out content standards and guidelines, there's no need to furnish the entire house all at once. You can start with a few statement pieces and let it flow naturally from there. This can mean simply drawing some lines, AP style or Chicago style, sentence case or title case, and drawing on your experience from previous roles to continue to fill that out. This also means setting up a cadence of review to make sure that you're holding yourselves accountable for continuing to update and add to the standards. My team does this monthly. And glossaries can be tough. This is an area where oftentimes there are just too many terms to tackle all at once. So for me, this is about leveraging your long-timers. Start by finding tenured employees at your company who can help you compile a list of existing terminology. Because from there, you can flag terms that appear to be duplicates of each other or should otherwise be revisited, and then you can add audits of these terms to your team's backlog to create future content-led projects. Now finally, for voice and tone, it can really be helpful to set boundaries on the scope of voice and tone work. If you're out to tackle company-wide voice and tone, for instance, you may end up in a stalemate with your brand or marketing counterparts, and all of a sudden, your timeline is no longer yours. I've actually found it easier to establish product voice and tone guidelines first to bring along teams like marketing and support in the process, and then using your new guidelines as a compass for everyone else. It's a bit of a hack, but it's more than likely that you're making more progress in this area than other teams who may be a bit territorial over it. So now you've eloquently outlined everything, but you don't want to be the tree falling in the forest. Don't be afraid to use wide-ranging official channels to disseminate information and be visible. Again, this is only my humble opinion, but I was told that our product and engineering Slack channels and email aliases weren't meant for function-wide announcements. But I decided that I'd ask for forgiveness and not permission, and I sent out my comms over these channels anyway. Surprise, no one came away frustrated, and in fact, people were starting to engage with our work very quickly. And you don't even really need to worry about engagement in these early stages here. You don't need to look at the number of emoji responses you're getting to announcements or the number of comments, because people are either reading what you're writing, or if they're not, you have a place to point them when they get it wrong. So having this documentation is a great first step to a healthy team, but how do you keep a happy team? We are on to chapter 4, which is protecting your team and your time. I personally found a number of building blocks that have been essential to setting my team up for success. The first is a team charter. So when you took this job, what did you envision as your brand for content design? Creating a vision and guiding principles with your folks can help you and your team make quick and important decisions, even as you're growing and finding yourselves. Another thing worth getting started on early, even if you don't have a team, is a career framework with levels and competencies. This is a big enough topic for an entire conference talk, but the best way to keep your team happy here is to devote your energy to making sure your titles and the competencies match with the rest of UX. Also, by ensuring that most of your competencies are parallel with the other UX disciplines, you can continue to make the argument for equity in things like comp and responsibilities. Which brings me to another important crossroads, making decisions about coverage. This is a very personal decision and determined by a lot of factors, but here's where I have found success. I've set up my team as embedded in a wider product area so that they can become subject matter experts, but they are only covering 1 to 2 individual projects at a time. This allows them to make relationships with the right ratio of product designers, PMs, and engineers, while also being available in wider design crits and product reviews to provide additional expertise. So what happens with the rest of the work, you ask? It's a very hot topic right now, but we have 2 big chunks of office hour slots that anyone with uncovered work can sign up for. Now, to make this work, we rotate facilitators among the team, time box to 30 minutes, and have set and reset expectations over and over again that we will not be doing any homework, that unfinished work can come back the next week. This particular office hours model works for me because I can document what's coming through in order to make headcount requests, and it allows for a basic level of governance over work that is otherwise done in a silo. It also just whets the appetite for dedicated content design support. The last building block here is a prioritization model. It's essential to have some sort of barometer, hopefully one that you can make public, for evaluating the importance of the work you're being asked to take on, because as we all know, there's too much work to go around. This model will be particular to the company and your circumstance, but here is how my team has approached it. Our model looks like this. Impact, which is the number or percent of our customer base, times risk. How bad would it be if the project went sideways? Times content design opportunity. So this is complexity, scope, how content-led the project is. I also like to add a hidden factor that I don't advertise, which is openness of that particular product team to taking input or making changes from their content design partners. So this model allows us to quickly evaluate and stack rank projects that come in, then make that public in order to set expectations right off the bat. You might want to take some time to think about the factors that weigh the most heavily on you when you're deciding what to work on. Now we've made it to the final chapter. At this point, you've got many of your ducks in a row, and you may even have a modest team to spread the gospel. But we all know that the ride will continue to be a bit bumpy. So with that in mind, we're at Chapter 5, shoring up your support system. Now, sometimes the hardest part of starting a new function is the fact that you feel all alone in the process, that you have all these thoughts and anxieties rattling around your brain and no one to share them with. But for my last lesson, I'm here to remind you that you are not alone on this path. There are a number of different people and groups that you can lean on to help you along the way. So who are these glorious people? Well, first of all, consider making it a priority to get close with your peers in UX leadership, the other legs of the stool that can help keep you standing. I like to proactively set up one-on-ones and group sessions with these people because not only can they help you catch up on any meetings that you may have missed or projects coming down the pipeline, but they can be your loudest champions at moments when you need it the most. And despite the frustrations we may have from time to time about inclusion and the pedestal of product design, it's a good reminder that you have friends who care about the user experience and will help you fight when you need it. You can also build up a base of supporters by establishing yourself and your team as being educators for the wider product and UX orgs around what good writing looks like. My team at Outreach gains most of our own popularity in the product org by sending out a monthly newsletter that has writing tips as well as inspiration from other companies and any new guidelines that we may have added. And while helping product managers and product designers continue to improve their own product copy, maybe their own writing at large, we're simultaneously extending our message and earning supporters. Speaking of evangelism, it's also a good idea to make friends in other departments such as marketing, legal, customer support, and more, so that when you tackle your big projects, such as voice and tone, the support and evangelism can stretch further at the company. Now, of course, if you do have a team, they are an amazing support system for new ideas and can be the biggest help in shaping the direction of your org. I've liked to establish a regular cadence beyond one-on-ones with my team, despite the fact that there are only 2 folks on the team, to tackle wider function conversations. This is through things like a weekly team meeting, through private and public Slack groups, and a content-specific team crit. And of course, I'd be remiss not to mention the support groups, like Lead with Tempo, that exist outside of the company, where you can share your deepest, darkest fears and questions with other leaders going through many of the same trials and tribulations as you are. And beyond Lead with Tempo, which has been an amazing resource, I've also found a number of manager groups that come together regularly to talk through major issues we're having. You can feel free to reach out directly to me if you want more information about Lead with Tempo or any of these other groups. It's just been a fantastic way to feel like I've got people in my corner as I tackle new challenges. So with that, that's the quick and dirty version of my experience and lessons that I learned along the way as I built a new content design team. If this is a path you're considering or have already started, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly with questions or thoughts. I love talking with folks about this work. And I want to leave you with this, to remember you've got what it takes to build a team, and the company you've joined is going to be much better off for having you there. Thank you so much.